Hello and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today we have the case of Shanda Shatter. First of all, this is an extremely long case. So grab something to drink, maybe get yourself a coffee, or find something to do because we're going to be here for a long time. Take a moment to look at the images because in some parts it's going to get confusing. Regarding each person's name, there are several people involved, and you'll probably benefit from seeing their faces every now and then. So while up there, the one that's on the screen, you can see the rest of my cases. Down here, you have my social media in case you want to follow me on any of them. And without anything else to say, let's get started. Jackie Bott is the mother of Shanda Shatter. Jackie's first marriage was to her high school boyfriend, Mike Boardman. This marriage lasted only 2 years after the birth of their daughter, Paige. Her second marriage brought Shanda Renee Shatter, who was born in Pineville, Kentucky on June 6, 1979. Her father is Stephen Malloy Shatter. This second marriage didn't work out either. The curious thing about these two relationships that Jackie had was that she knew both of them from high school, and in fact, these two were best friends. The truth is that for her second divorce, Jackie tried to make sure the relationship wasn't a failure, and that they could get along for the sake of the family. Shanda was 7 years old when Jackie married Ronnie Ott, who at 41 years old was 10 years older than Jackie. And he offered her the financial security that she felt she and her two daughters needed. Like the previous marriages, it didn't last forever either, and after 4 years they ended up getting divorced. But by then, quite a bit of time had already passed since the first marriage. And Paige, now 19 years old, was living with Jackie's sister Debbie in an apartment across the street from Jackie's house. Steve Shatter, on his side, had remarried and was now living with his wife Sharon and their 2 children near Jeffersonville. Shanda's parents used to see each other during their daughter's school activities. The young girl, for her part, enjoyed visiting her father's house and was happy that she and her mother now lived so close to Paige. Yanda attended St. Paul's School in 5th and 6th grade, participating in cheerleading, volleyball, and softball. After her mother's second divorce, the family then moved in June of 1991 to New Albany, Indiana. And Yanda enrolled at Hazelwood School. Her first day of classes was fantastic. As soon as she arrived, she looked happy. She loved Hazelwood. Her teachers, according to her, were nice, and she had already met some classmates. But just 2 days later, something happened that made the vice principal of Hazelwood call Jackie. Yanda had been in a fight with another girl. This was not normal behavior for her daughter. When Jackie got home, she found Yanda crying. Her daughter had a cut on her face and a bump on the back of her head. It all started when a girl in Yanda's class told her that she wanted to break up with her boyfriend, but she was too afraid to give back the ring he had given her. So Yanda offered to do it for her. She went, found the boy in question, and tried to explain what she was doing, but he took it the wrong way and started to get angry. While a circle of children was forming around them, the boy's cousin showed up and started a fight in which Yanda ended up on the floor. Both of them were punished for a week. Is that how Yanda met Amanda? Amanda wasn't performing well academically but excelled in athletics, particularly basketball at school. Although she tended to be calm and polite with adults, at school she was described as arrogant and a little dangerous. She used to dress in baggy clothes, big jeans, and a baseball cap. Amanda's attitude, body, and clothing had attracted a certain girl named Melinda Loveless, an 8th grade student. A little fun fact here, for those who don't know English, Loveless means without love. That was her last name, Melinda. She had been held back a year in school and was about to turn 16. She had several admirers, but only had eyes for Amanda. Melinda Loveless was born in New Albany on October 28, 1975, as the youngest of 3 daughters of Marjorie and Larry Loveless. Larry Eugene Loveless was forced to join the army during the Vietnam War. This caused him deep emotional wounds and trauma, even though he was treated as a hero by most people when he returned. And I say most people because Marjorie later described him as a sexual deviant who liked to wear her underwear and that of their daughters. According to her, he was incapable of staying monogamous and had a mix of jealousy and fascination when he saw her having sex with other men and women. The family lived in New Albany during Melinda's childhood. Larry worked irregularly for the Southern Railroad after his military service, and his profession allowed him to work whenever it was convenient for him. In 1965, Larry became a probationary officer in the New Albany Police Department, but he was fired 8 months later, when he and his partner assaulted an African-American man whom Larry accused of sleeping with his wife. In 1988, Larry worked for a short period as a mailman, but he quit 3 months later after delivering very few letters, since he took most of the mail home with him. To destroy it, Marjorie worked intermittently since 1974. When both parents were working, the family was in a relatively good financial position. Living in the upper-middle-class suburbs of Floyd Knox, Indiana, Larry, who was violent and abusive, usually did not share his income with the family and spent any money he managed to get impulsively on himself, particularly on firearms, motorcycles, and cars. That's how he declared bankruptcy in 1980. The Loveless daughters used to visit other relatives' houses asking for food because they weren't given enough at home. The couple often went to several bars in Louisville where Larry pretended to be a doctor or a dentist and introduced Marjorie as his girlfriend. He also used to share her with some of his friends and co-workers, something she actually found disgusting. During an orgy with another couple at their house, Marjorie tried to take her own life, an act she would repeat several times during her daughter's childhood. When Melinda was 9 years old, Larry subjected Marjorie to a gang rape, after which she tried to drown herself. After this incident, she denied Larry sex for a month until he raped her again, while her daughters listened to the event through a closed door. Imagine all of this is what Melinda grew up with. And it must be clarified right now that this is not actually a justification, but you will find that all the stories I'm going to tell you about each of these girls' pasts are terrible. In the summer of 1986, after she didn't let him come home with 2 women he had met at a bar, Larry beat Marjorie so severely that she had to be hospitalized. After this, Larry was convicted of assault. The extent of this man's abuse toward his daughters and other children is not entirely clear. Several testimonies allege that he harassed Melinda when she was a child. In fact, until a few years ago, she would give interviews and talk about how it was very hard for her to admit that her father, with whom she actually wanted to have a good relationship, had abused her. There are also testimonies indicating that he abused Marjorie's 13-year-old sister and harassed the girl's cousin, Teddy. From the ages of 10 to 14, his 2 older daughters also stated that he had harassed them. Melinda slept in the same bed with him until she left the family at the age of 14. Later, in court, Teddy described an incident in which Larry tied up the 3 sisters in the home garage and raped them one after another. Larry was verbally abusive toward his daughters and fired a gun in the direction of Melinda's older sister, Michelle, when she was 7 years old, intentionally failing. He had a habit of embarrassing his daughters by picking up their underwear and smelling them in front of other family members. For 2 years, starting when Melinda was 5, the family became deeply involved with the Graceland Baptist Church. Larry and Marjorie fully confessed their activities and swore to give up drinking and swinging as long as they were members of this church. Larry became a Baptist pastor and Marjorie got a job as a nurse at the school. The church then ordered that Melinda be taken to a hotel room with a 50-year-old man for a 5-hour exorcism. Later, Larry became a marriage counselor within the church and gained a reputation for being very open with women. Little by little, he gained some confidence and eventually tried to rape one of the women who was close to him. After that incident, the Lovelesses left the church and returned to their old professions and vices. In November of 1990, after Larry was caught spying on Melinda and a friend of hers, Marjorie attacked him from behind with a knife. He was sent to the hospital after trying to grab him with his hands, maybe because of this event or the series of problems with her husband. Marjorie tried to take her own life again and her daughters had to call emergency services. As a result of this episode, Larry filed for divorce and moved to Avon Park, Florida. Melinda felt devastated at that time, especially when Larry got married again. For a while, he sent her letters trying to manipulate her emotions, but eventually he stopped all communication with her. By this time, Shanda still didn't know Melinda. She had only met Amanda after Amanda hit her. At that time, Melinda lived in a small 2-story house right across from a cemetery on Charleston Road. Her mother had gotten divorced, and even though she had a good job as a nurse at Floyd Memorial Hospital, she was having trouble making the house payments. A year after her divorce, she had remarried. Her new husband, Mike Donahue, had a job in Louisville, and together they provided well for the household, which included Melinda and Melissa, since the older sister Michelle had moved out at that time. Melinda had her own things, her own space, but she wasn't completely happy. She was bothered by this new stepfather she had and resisted his attempts to befriend her. That's when she started spending more time than ever with Amanda. At the beginning of that year, her mother asked her about a mark she had on her neck, and Melinda admitted that she and Amanda were lovers. Marjorie had responded to this with anger and disappointment. She was unable to understand why her 3 daughters were lesbians, but after a while she understood and left her alone. When this fight with Yanda happened, Amanda explained what had happened as a kind of triumph. She was proud of having hit her, but upset about having to endure the punishment the school gave her. And at first, Melinda wasn't particularly worried about any of that, since both of them had been in this kind of trouble before. It just meant they wouldn't be able to spend time together between classes. The real problem came when Amanda's attitude toward the girl who had hit Yanda changed. She started to explain to her that during the time they spent together in detention, they had made up and were now friends, that she really liked Yanda. That's when Melinda decided one day to arrive late to class so she could go to detention with them. During detention, she realized that the girls were already very close, sharing notes, smiling at each other, getting closer. Perhaps too close, but that's another tale. Other than that, Amanda only talked about Yanda, so Melinda realized something was going on, and she didn't like it at all. That day, when the teacher told the students they could finally leave, Melinda grabbed her books and waited for Amanda in the hallway. She wanted to talk to her alone, but Amanda came out with Yanda by her side. The girls were laughing, nudging each other, and walking together. Amanda then walked up to Melinda and formally introduced her to Yanda. That afternoon after school, Melinda took Amanda to her room as usual. Before that, at school, she had seen Amanda slip some notes from Yanda into her pocket. So, when they got to her room, she tried to get the letters from her to see what they had been talking about. Finally, Melinda hit her and took the notes from her, or rather, letters that were starting to get a bit romantic. One of the notes said that Amanda was very pretty. It was obvious that both girls were attracted to each other, and of course that Melinda had a problem with this. Despite their 2 years together, Amanda's feelings differed, and she desired to be with Shanda. That's how Amanda and Shanda kept seeing each other. Shanda. She even introduced her to her mother, Jackie, who actually didn't like her. She didn't think she was the best person to be around. In terms of a romantic relationship, Jackie didn't think too much about it, since actually Yanda really liked boys. She had her first boyfriend at a pretty young age and was always more interested in that side. The truth is, anyway, that Yanda hadn't really had an introduction to homosexuality either. She practically didn't know anything. Her parents didn't have any openly homosexual friends, and in fact, she had never met anyone who claimed to be homosexual. Basically, no one had talked to her about the subject. So, while Jackie thought it was impossible for her daughter to be involved romantically with this girl, Shanda was trying to understand what was happening to her. Amanda, on her part, tried to slowly figure out if they could be more than friends. And that's why these are some of the things she wrote to Shanda in little notes. In the first one, dated September 13th and addressed to Shanda, Amanda hinted a little bit about homosexuality. If we hadn't fought, this wouldn't have happened. It happened. I don't want you to think I'm a bad person or anything. I don't like to fight. I hate fighting. Right when I had you on the ground getting ready to hit you, I couldn't because you looked so helpless down there. But you tried to hit me and missed, so I started hitting. I want the truth, you know? Do you even want to fight? If not, no worries. I can help if needed. What's your question? I know this might sound silly, but do you like girls? Well, do you like girls? If so, I think that's great because it's very different. Is that why you're so nice to me? Do you think I'm cute or something like that? Please tell me the truth. I won't laugh because I think it's great. On another note, 3 days later, Amanda alluded to recent conversations she had had with Yanda. Amanda had already told Yanda about her relationship with Melinda and was starting to pressure her to form a similar friendship. Saying, Yanda was asking me, "Do you still like me?" If that's the case, I'm glad. I have plans for when I see you Friday or Saturday if you know what I mean. Just kidding. Or do you want me not to joke? Do you want what I have planned to happen? If so, answer yes. Postscript. I think I'm starting to like someone. Do you know her? This behavior continued until finally Yanda invited Amanda to her house and they had sex. From then on, they kept being together. However, Amanda knew she had to hide it as much as possible from Melinda because she was a very jealous and physically aggressive person. However, they continued their correspondence, which was not a good idea. Meanwhile, Yanda was becoming more and more lonely. Getting involved with Amanda brought her problems, since the rest of the people who knew her avoided her and the people around her. No one wanted trouble. By then, she had only one friend left outside of school. She told this girl that she was probably bisexual because she still liked men a lot. Yanda's friend sensed that because of her kind nature, she might have been quickly pushed into a relationship with someone she maybe didn't really want. The truth is that Yanda and Amanda spent so much time together that it was more than obvious what was happening between them, and Melinda wanted to separate them. So one day, she left a note for Yanda that said the following: "Yanda, please don't be afraid of me. I just want to be your friend. I just don't like it when you talk to Amanda when I'm not there. I mean, why can't the three of us be friends? You act like you have something with her. Amanda and I are together and she loves me and I love her. She wants to be your friend, and you must accept that. Don't hide behind my back. Why don't you talk to Amanda when she's with me? You need to find a boyfriend because Amanda is mine and you can even ask her. Please talk to both of them. Or can you forget about Amanda? You, Amanda, and I need to talk together and fix this. So, could we all be friends? Can you meet with us at lunch, your friend Mel?" This didn't work. Yanda and Amanda kept seeing each other, so Melinda decided to corner her one day in a hallway and tell her not to go near her girlfriend, Melinda. She thought her threats had worked until one day she opened Amanda's locker and found a heart-shaped note. On the note were written the words, "Yanda loves Amanda." Furious, Melinda caught Yanda in the hallway, grabbed her by the hair, and pushed her against the wall. This time she warned her again that Amanda was hers and that Yanda should stay away. This time she told her directly to her face, yes. But Melinda was already fed up and told Amanda that they were over and that she could have Yanda if she wanted her. After a few days, Melinda calmed down and apologized to Amanda, who promised to stay away from Yanda. The truth is that Amanda was lying. And after her meeting with Melinda, she wrote Yanda a note telling him what had happened. She expressed her desire to be with both individuals, that she loved them both. Around that time, Amanda asked Shanda to go with her to a school dance, knowing that Melinda didn't like dances, and that she had made plans to spend the night with her friend Carrie Pope, who was 17 years old. These two young women met through a group of gay and lesbian teenagers who hung out together in New Albany and Louisville. Carrie also had her own car and knew someone who could buy them alcohol, since remember, they were underage at the time. Melinda drank excessively the night of the dance. In that state, she asked Carrie to drive her to the school to see if Amanda was with Shanda at the dance. Carrie tried to dissuade her because she understood how the night could end if something happened. But Melinda insisted, and they ended up in the parking lot of the place, waiting for the dance to end. When Melinda saw Amanda and Shanda leaving together, she got angry and went straight to confront them. After the school principal broke up the fight, Amanda left with Melinda and her friend, making excuses about why she had gone to the dance with Shanda. Once again, Melinda trusted her, but just a few days later, she saw them together again, even though she had expressly told her that she didn't want them to talk if she wasn't there. Since then, Melinda started dating a friend of one of her sisters, actually thinking that Amanda would get jealous and run straight into her arms. It wasn't like that at all. Amanda finally thought she could be with Shanda without any problems and assured her that everything was fine. That now she understood Melinda was a bad person and that nothing bad would happen between them anymore. As was normal for her, Amanda wrote several letters to Shanda professing her love, and each time she hated Melinda more and more. She even told her that she couldn't stand her and didn't want to see her, but the truth is that Amanda was playing both sides. Because after a while, she did start to get jealous that her ex-girlfriend was with someone else. She even managed to find this girl's phone number and started making threatening calls to her. She managed to get Melinda's attention, and they both decided to get back together, without telling Yanda, of course. Just to give you an idea, Amanda wrote this to Yanda. Yanda, hi honey. Yes, I love you, but I feel like Melinda has me in a trance, and I don't know how to get out, and I'm scared. If I try to get out, something bad will happen, and I'm terrified. Yanda, I wouldn't tell Melinda we're leaving. She'd probably kill you. I love you so much, Yanda, my love. I love you, Amanda. While Amanda was trying to fix all of this, she was facing another problem. Yanda had started making new friends, and several of them were boys. Suddenly, Yanda stopped answering her calls and responding to her notes. Instead of meeting her between classes, Yanda was spending time with two other people, two boys named Ray and Mike. Amanda had started to get jealous of her too, and the letters she sent her became more and more threatening. She accused her of cheating on her and not telling her the truth. Since Yanda was busy with her new friends, Amanda started spending more time with Melinda and other friends. On one occasion, while all this was happening, Amanda was caught skipping school, so Amanda's father called Jackie at her work. Jerry Hebring. He didn't know who Amanda had actually gone with that day, who she had skipped school with. So he warned Jackie that Yanda might have been with her skipping school. Jackie called the school, but they told her that Yanda was in class and hadn't missed all day. So that night when she talked to her about it, Yanda admitted to her mother that Amanda and some other girls had tried to persuade her to skip school with them, but she didn't do it. Jackie was proud of her daughter and also took the opportunity to tell her that she would prefer if she didn't see Amanda anymore. Shanda's father and stepmother, Steve and Sharon Shatter, didn't know that Jackie had actually forbidden Shanda from seeing Amanda at that time. So nothing crossed their minds when Shanda asked them if Amanda could come with them to the Harvest Homecoming, the annual fall festival held in New Albany in October. Steve and Sharon had met Amanda once before, and at that time she was dressed very nicely and behaved in the best way. That, of course, was in the hope of impressing them. So, when they went to pick up Amanda that night, Steve and Sharon were surprised by her appearance. She was fully dressed and appeared to be a boy, which was the opposite of what they saw the first time. But that wasn't even the problem. Steve and Sharon were also discouraged by Amanda's arrogant attitude. She seemed to be trying to impress Yanda by being aggressive or rude. On the way home from the festival, Yanda asked if Amanda could stay over, but Steve and Sharon refused. That last part didn't really matter for what happened next, because the next day one of Melinda's friends told her she had seen Amanda with Yanda at the Harvest Homecoming. And Melinda couldn't believe it, since Amanda had told her she would stay at her own house that night, that she wouldn't do anything. Christy, Melinda's friend, confirmed that they had met, and Melinda spent a lot of time that day complaining to her about everything she had done, about seeing them separated, and that nothing was working. She told Christy that she wanted to hurt Yanda. However, her friend Christy told her at that moment that the problem shouldn't be with Yanda, but with Amanda, who kept insisting and giving her hope that they could be together. That night, Christy and Melinda devised a plan. Christy called Amanda and invited her to sneak out later, which Amanda agreed to, thinking it would be fun. Without knowing that Melinda was going to be there, Christy told her that she would convince some guys to drive and that they would pick her up. That night, Melinda and Christy finalized the plan's details. Christy convinced one of her boyfriends to pick her and Melinda up and take them to Amanda's house, where Melinda would hide in the back seat, while Christy went to the door to get Amanda. When Amanda got into the car, Melinda would grab her. Then they would drive to a secluded place, where Melinda would beat Amanda as much as she wanted. This plan, these steps I'm telling you about, are key as they would form the basis of the plan to hurt Shanda later. But right then, they were after Amanda. The girl had lied and played both sides all that time, so Melinda was very angry. They went to the apartment of an older boy. Melinda wasn't interested in using drugs since she wanted to keep her head clear for the confrontation with Amanda. Christy didn't have any money, so she paid for the drugs by having sex with one of the boys. It wasn't the first time she had done this kind of exchange, and in fact, she had developed a drug addiction, which led to her mother taking her to a rehab center a few weeks later. As the hours went by while all this was happening, Melinda grew impatient and started begging Christy to leave. By that time, Christy was already a little upset since she wasn't feeling very well. It seems that the cocaine they had given her was fake. It was a mixture of baking soda and speed. So a lot of time went by, they didn't show up, and the plan for that night was ruined. Because by the time they got to Amanda's house, she was already asleep and couldn't take care of Melinda. So she changed her mindset, and next time she would be more careful, more precise. She would have other people on her side, but also the victim would be someone else. In just a month, Shanda had changed significantly. She came to that school as an athletic and active girl, wearing very feminine clothes and makeup. She used to do her hair every day, cared a lot about her appearance. She went from that to wearing baggy clothes, not caring at all about how she looked, and she didn't even leave her room. Her parents noticed something was wrong with her, but didn't know what to do at the time. One day, Jackie went into her daughter's room while she wasn't there, and saw a note from Amanda, where she was teaching her how to forge a signature. To excuse her from detention, Yanda's mother called the school, and they told her that her daughter had been in detention several times because of a note signed in her name. When she went to the school in person, she found out that everything was worse than she had imagined. They showed her not only all the notes signed to excuse her from detention, but also Yanda's report card. All the grades were failing but allegedly signed by the mother. At that moment, Yanda was called to the principal's office, and when her mother confronted her, she started to cry. She apologized to her, admitting everything and feeling very ashamed. She also explained why she didn't just avoid Amanda. Yanda said that she couldn't do it because she was protecting her from other girls who wanted to beat her up. Those girls were Melinda and her friends. Was this the first time Jackie was hearing Melinda's name? From that moment on, Yanda changed again. She tried to spend time with her other friends and study more. She even had a private tutor to make up for all the months she failed. But Amanda kept looking for her. It got to the point that Jackie went to Amanda's father's house to tell him she didn't want their daughters to see each other ever again. And this wasn't news to him, since many parents had come to tell him the same thing, but he really didn't know what to do about it. The phone calls from Amanda stopped anyway. With the help of her tutor, Shanda was getting good grades again. Jackie thought everything was under control. Then, while checking the mail on a Saturday, she found a letter from Shanda to Amanda, which had been returned because it didn't have a stamp. Jackie opened the envelope and found a school photo of Shanda. On the back, her daughter had written the following note. Amanda, I miss you and I will always love you. No matter what happens, I miss the touch of your soft body. Immediately, Jackie called her ex-husband and told him everything. Shanda was staying at her father's house that day and tried to lie, saying it was just a joke. But her mother, father, and stepmother knew perfectly well that it wasn't, and that they had to put an end to this at the root. If they weren't just friends, as Shanda had said, then the relationship would be much harder to end. After Shanda simply wouldn't admit the truth, her parents decided to transfer her to a Christian Catholic school in New Albany. There, she joined the girls' basketball team and was able to make new friends. It wasn't easy. They had to pay more and she didn't want to leave the school. Hazelwood. At first, beyond that, everything was perfect. Shanda had run away, and Melinda was finally happy because she didn't have a rival to compete with anymore. The story could have ended there, with each of them moving on with their lives and relationships, but it didn't. Shanda and Amanda resumed their secret letter correspondence. Amanda invited her to another school dance, and again the same thing happened, a confrontation. The story seemed to never end. At the beginning of December, Amanda's father found dozens of letters from Melinda in his daughter's room. Worried about the sexual content of many of the notes, Jerry Herring was determined to put an end to this relationship. He took the letters to Virgil C., the county's juvenile probation officer, and at his request. Say contacted Melinda and told her that if she didn't stay away from Amanda, she could face harassment charges in juvenile court. Melinda was clearly angry. She felt that Shanda was responsible for all her problems, even though she wasn't there. And over the next few weeks, she would tell all her friends that she wanted to kill Shanda. She also asked one of her friends, named Crystal, what would be the best way to get rid of a body, and she replied that putting it in a container and setting it on fire would be the way. Actually, with what had happened that last time at the dance, Shanda didn't want anything to do with Amanda and Melinda's whole group anymore, so she really had nothing to worry about. Shanda was content with her new school. Daily, her attitude visibly improved. On top of everything, she refused any contact with Amanda, not wanting to be near her anymore. But since Melinda no longer believed anything she said, Amanda thought that Shanda would come back and that she was a threat. So she kept holding on to the idea that she had to pay. That's when she starts expanding her circle of friends, and that's how she finally meets the people with whom she commits the crime. The previous fall, Melinda had met, thanks to Carrie Pope, many young people, among whom were two 17-year-old twin brothers named Larry and Terry. Lida Berry, they had recently moved from Madison, Indiana to Louisville. It was through them that Carrie and Melinda met Lori Tackett for the first time. Lori had been close friends with the Lida Berrys in Madison and shared their fascination with the occult. So let's do a quick review of the people Melinda would meet and who would help her carry out this crime. Even though some of them really didn't want to do it, Mary Lauren Lori Tackett was born on October 5, 1974 in Madison, Indiana. Her mother was a fundamentalist Pentecostal Christian, and her father was a twice-convicted laborer. In the 1960s, Lori said she had been abused at least twice, at the ages of 5 and 12. In May 1989, her mother discovered that at school, she would change her clothes to put on pants. She scolded her, they started arguing, and finally she tried to strangle Lori. After this incident, social workers got involved in the matter, and Lori's parents agreed with them to have surprise visits to make sure the girl was not being abused. Lori and her mother continued to have a terrible relationship, and at one point, Lori's mother went to the home of Hope Rippey, another person involved, and went to her house. After finding out that Rippey's father had bought a Ouija board for the girls, she demanded that the board be burned and the Rippey house be exorcised. Lori became progressively more rebellious after her 15th birthday, and she was increasingly fascinated with the occult. She also used to tell her friends that she was possessed by a spirit to impress them. Lori began to self-harm, especially starting in 1991 when she started dating a girl who did the same. Her parents discovered her wounds and admitted her to a hospital on March 19, 1991. She was prescribed an antidepressant and was discharged. 2 days later, together with her girlfriend and a girl named Toni Lawrence, Lori cut her wrists deeply and was taken back to the hospital. After treating her wounds, she was admitted to a psychiatric hospital. Lori was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder and confessed to having experienced hallucinations since she was a child. She was discharged on April 12 and dropped out of school in September of 1991. Lori stayed in Louisville in October of 1991 to live with several friends. That's where she met Melinda Loveless, and the two became friends at the end of November. That same month, Lori moved back to Madison with the promise that her father would buy her a car. She also spent most of her time in Louisville and New Albany, and in December, together with Melinda Hope. Anna Rippey was born on June 9, 1976 in Madison. Her father was an engineer at a power plant. Her parents divorced in February 1984, and she moved with her mother and relatives to Quincy, Michigan for 3 years. She later stated that living with her family in Michigan had been intense. Her parents resumed their relationship in Madison in 1987. She reunited with her friends, Lori Tackett and Toni Lawrence, whom she had known since childhood, although their parents saw Lori as a bad influence. Hope began to self-harm at the age of 15. Toni Lawrence was born in Madison on February 14, 1976. Her father was a boilermaker and she was Hope's childhood friend. She suffered abuse from a family member at the age of 9 and was raped by an older teenager at the age of 14. Because of this, she obtained a restraining order to keep him away. She started therapy after the incident but did not continue with it. She began to self-harm and attempted to take her own life in 8th grade. As you can see, the girls who committed this crime, or rather helped, had not had the best lives. January 8, 1992. Lori called Melinda and invited her to a concert. She agreed, but with one condition. She wanted the night to include a trip to Shanda's house. She told Lori that she needed her help with a plan she had come up with to get Shanda out of her house. Melinda told her that she wanted to kill Shanda, and Lori, without thinking twice, told her it was possible. Then Lori told Melinda that she had already asked 2 girls to go with them that night. Melinda asked if they would agree with the plan to catch Shanda, and Lori assured her that it wouldn't be a problem. The truth was that Lori was sure that one of the girls, Toni Lawrence, wouldn't go if she found out what the outing was really about. However, she informed her that Hope Rippey, the other girl, was a different case entirely. Lori had a lot of influence over Hope and knew she was capable of fighting because she had done it before. So on that side, they wouldn't have a problem. The first stop for the young women was the Madison Walmart, where Lori and Hope stole some batteries for Lori's CD player. After that, they bought some burgers at a fast food restaurant, also fuel and cigarettes, and then they headed toward New Albany. By then, they had already chosen the place to take Yanda, and it was a place that Lori and her friends called the Witch's Castle. Actually, it was just the ruins of a large old stone mansion near the Ohio River in Utica, a small town upstream from Jeffersonville. The ruins were nothing more than that, old pieces of an abandoned building, but there were still some intact parts that were scary, like the dungeons where some members of this group had performed rituals. On the night of January 10, 1992, Toni Lawrence, Hope Rippey, and Lori Tuckett drove Lori's car from Madison to the Loveless's house in New Albany. When they arrived, they borrowed some clothes from Melinda and she showed them a knife, telling them she was going to scare Yanda. With it, Lori let Hope drive to Jeffersonville, where Yanda stayed with her father on weekends. They later asked for directions at McDonald's and arrived at Yanda's home before dark. Melinda told Hope and Toni to go to the front door and introduce themselves as Amanda's friends, and then to invite Yanda to visit Amanda, who was supposedly waiting for her at the witch's castle. Yanda told the girls she couldn't join them at the ruins yet because her parents were still up and asked them to return later. Melinda was upset at first, but Hope and Toni convinced her to come back later for Shanda. The 4 young women crossed the river and attended a punk rock concert by the band Sunspring at a skate park near Interstate 65. Lawrence and Rippey quickly lost interest in the music and went to the parking lot, where they had sex with 2 men in Lori Tuckett's car. Then the 4 young women headed back to Shanda's house. During the trip, Melinda said she couldn't wait to kill Shanda. However, she later repeated that she just wanted to scare her. When they got back to the house around 12:30 p.m., Toni refused to go get Yanda, so Lori and Hope went to the door. Melinda hid under a sheet in the back seat of the car with a knife in her hand. Hope told Yanda that Amanda was still waiting for her at Witch's Castle, and she hesitated about whether or not to go with the girls. But she finally agreed after changing her clothes. As they were getting into the car, Hope started questioning Yanda about her relationship with Amanda. Then Melinda, upset by the conversation because they were also asking her if she had been intimate, jumped out of the back seat. She put the knife against Yanda's body and started questioning her about her sexual activities. They drove toward Utica, heading to Witch's Castle. Lori said that a local legend claimed the house had been inhabited by 9 witches and that the townspeople had burned it down to get rid of them. All of this was to scare Yanda a little more. Half of the girls hoped that nothing would happen, that it was just to scare her, and the other half knew what they were getting into. Once at Witch's Castle, the young women took Yanda, who was crying by that point, inside the place and tied her hands and feet with a rope. At one point, Melinda mocked Yanda, saying that she had very beautiful hair and asking her how pretty she would be if they cut it off. This frightened Shanda even more. Melinda started removing her rings and giving them to each young woman. Hope took off her Mickey Mouse watch and danced to the rhythm of the music it made. Lori intimidated Shanda even more. telling her that the place was full of human corpses and that she would be next. In an attempt to threaten her even more, Lori took a t-shirt out of the car, which had a printed design of a smile. It had a painted bullet hole and blood coming out of that hole. And they tried to set it on fire, but then they were afraid that the fire would alert other cars that were there. So they just put it out and left with Yanda in the car. During the trip, Yanda kept begging the young women to take her back home. Melinda ordered Yanda to take off her bra, which she then handed to Hope, who took off her own bra and put on Yanda's instead. While she was driving, suddenly they got lost, stopped at a gas station and covered Yanda with a blanket. While Lori was heading to the store to ask for directions, Tony called a guy she knew in Louisville and talked to him for a few minutes to calm her nerves. But she didn't mention the kidnapping. They got back in the car, kept going, got lost again, and they stopped at another gas station. There, Tony and Hope spotted a couple of kids, chatted with them for a moment, then got back in the car and continued the trip. Finally, they arrived at a forest near Lori's home in Madison. Lori led them to an abandoned cabin in a densely wooded area. Tony and Hope were scared of the wooded place, so they stayed inside the car. By then, they had no desire to remain there. You could tell what was about to happen. Melinda and Lori forced Yanda to undress until she was only in her underwear. Then Melinda attacked Yanda, hitting her. She repeatedly slammed her face against her knee, which caused deep cuts in Yanda's mouth. When her mouth hit her own braces, blood started pouring out of her mouth in large amounts. Then she tried to cut Yanda's neck, but the knife was too dull. At that point, Melinda and Lori were determined to kill Yanda. They kept trying to get the knife through Yanda's neck, but she kept managing to break free. That's when Hope got out of the car to hold Yanda, while Melinda and Lori took turns stabbing her in the chest. Tony, who was still inside the car refusing to participate, was told that she was only trying to make Yanda break free from the attack, not helping. Melinda wrapped her arms around Yanda's legs, while Lori took a rope out of her pocket, slipped it around Yanda's neck, and twisted it tightly. Finally, they strangled her and took her motionless body to put it in the trunk of the car. Hope and Tony turned up the volume on the radio so that the girl's screams wouldn't be heard until they stopped. Once they got her into the car, Hope said she was very scared and shaking so much that Tony held her hand to calm her down. The girls drove to Lori's nearby house, went inside to drink and freshen up. When they heard Shanda screaming inside the trunk of the car, Lori went out with a kitchen knife and stabbed her several more times, then came back a few minutes later. Lori, covered in blood, washed up and read the girl's future with her runestones. At 2:30 in the morning, Tony and Hope stayed at the place, while Lori and Melinda went for a drive to the nearby town of Cannon. Shanda kept crying and making gurgling noises, and every time that happened, every time Shanda made too much noise, they beat her. This time, when they opened the trunk, Shanda suddenly sat up, covered in blood and with her eyes rolled back. The girls described it as if she had opened her eyes, but not completely. Her eyes were rolled back, showing only the whites. She couldn't speak and swayed slightly. Lori hit her with a tire iron until she went silent, later claiming that she felt her skull give way under the blows. There were also reports that Shanda had been sexually assaulted with the same tool several times. Melinda and Lori returned to the latter's place just before dawn to clean themselves up again. Hope asked about Shanda, and Lori described all the torture to her, laughing. Then she drove to a trash pile where they opened the trunk to look at Shanda, but Melinda refused. Hope sprayed Windex, the glass cleaner, on Shanda's body, and she mocked her, saying, "You don't look so sexy now, do you?" All the noise they were making woke up Lori's mother, and she went out to the yard. But from there, her view was of the front of the car and of how the girls were talking to each other while looking at the trunk. She asked what they were doing, and her daughter replied that they were trying to make a fire. She told her no and to leave, that it wasn't the time to be doing those things there. She was about to discover the girl's crime, but she didn't. The young women drove to a gas station near Madison Consolidated School. They filled the car with gas and bought a 2-liter bottle of Pepsi. Lori poured out all the drink from the bottle and refilled it with gasoline. They also drove north of Madison past the Jefferson Proving Ground military training area toward Lemon Road along Route 421, a place that was already familiar to Hope. Tony stayed in the car, while Lori and Hope wrapped Yanda, who was still alive, in a blanket, and from there, they took her to an empty field. When her body was removed, Tony averted his gaze, focusing on the radio music instead, as he desperately wished to be elsewhere. Lori made Hope pour fuel over Shanda, and from there they set her on fire. Melinda wasn't convinced that Shanda was dead, so she went back a few minutes later to pour the rest of the fuel on her. Afterwards, they went to a McDonald's around 9:30 in the morning to have breakfast. And there, at that moment, they were still making jokes, they were still laughing, and they even had the chance to make a joke about how the sausages they were eating looked like Shanda's body. Tony called one of his friends on the phone and told him about the crime. Afterwards, Lori dropped Tony and Hope off at their homes and finally returned to her town with Melinda. Melinda's friend Crystal received a call from her crying and asking her to come to her house. When Crystal arrived, the girls told her what had happened. Melinda was no longer laughing at that moment but was crying inconsolably. Lori was laughing, saying she no longer felt bad about having killed Shanda Melinda. After this, she called Amanda to tell her that something terrible had happened and to let her know she was on her way to talk to her. They drove the car used in the crime to the mall where Amanda worked, the same place where they later told her the whole story. Both Amanda and Crystal refused to believe them until Lori showed them the trunk of the car, where there were still blood splatters. And also Shanda's socks. They tried to clean the blood stains, by the way, but they couldn't. Amanda saw the trunk at that moment, recognized that those were Shanda's socks, and was horrified. She asked to be taken home immediately. When they arrived, Melinda kissed her, told her she loved her, and asked her not to tell anyone about what had happened. Amanda promised not to, then went inside. Through all of this, she never told anyone anything until the consequences became apparent. Later, around 4 in the morning, Yanda's father woke up because of the noise from the television that was still on. He entered the living room, turned off the television, and sensed a breeze, as if there was more air. He then saw that the kitchen door was open and thought that one of his older children must have left it like that after coming home late. In fact, she thought to herself that she would have to talk to the young man in the morning about not leaving the door open at night. She closed it, and before returning to her room, she passed by Yanda's room but didn't find her there. She assumed she had fallen asleep in a downstairs bed and went to sleep without checking. That's how she woke up again 3 hours later at 7 in the morning. That day, she had to do a renovation with her father and Yanda's stepfather, so she had to get out of bed quickly because they could arrive at any moment. His wife, Sharon, went to wake up Yanda downstairs where they thought she had slept while Steve was making coffee, but she didn't find her. Desperate, Steve thought that his daughter might have gone out to walk the family dog and that, when closing the door, she had locked them outside. They searched everywhere, but Shanda was not near the house. He then noticed Sparky, the family dog, limping up the driveway, whimpering and dragging his hind legs. She realized that obviously Shanda was not there. Steve's father thought that Shanda must have taken the dog for a walk, and someone took her at that moment. Early in the morning of January 11th, 1992. Two brothers were driving to the Jefferson Proving Ground military training field to go hunting when they noticed a bundle on the side of the road. At first they thought it was a mannequin, which often happens in many of these cases. And after getting out of the car, they realized it was clearly the burned body of a girl. They called the police at 10:55 in the morning and were asked to return to where the body was. That's when the investigation and evidence collection began. They studied the position of the victim's arms, which were raised in the air with clenched fists, and it seemed that the position of the arms could mean that the young woman was alive when they set her on fire and that she had struggled to free herself from a burning robe or blanket. That explained the burned red fabric she was still tightly holding in her fists. At first, they thought it had to do with drugs, with some deal that had gone wrong, and they didn't believe the crime was connected to local people. And this, more than anything, was because they didn't recognize Yanda as a 12-year-old girl, since she was a bit more developed than other girls her age. They thought it could be an older person, but it was already hard to recognize her initially. Because of the number of blows, the amount of things they had done to her, and also because of the burns. Also, they noticed that the body had been placed in a suggestive position, which showed that the act had been committed with certain intentions. It was also found that the victim's face and hands had been especially burned in an attempt to keep her unrecognizable. It seems so. So, Yanda's father had already realized that his daughter was missing. Besides, he was with his own father and with Yanda's stepfather, so they had already started looking for her everywhere. They called neighbors, friends. He also contacted Yanda's mother around 2 in the afternoon. And by that time, they gathered at the sheriff's office and finally filed the missing person report. All of this occurred on the same day. They had left the body in the field it had been discovered. The police were trying to figure out who it was, asking about people who had been reported missing. And meanwhile, Tony and Hope were eaten up by guilt. Then at 8:20 in the evening, Tony and Hope, hysterical, went to the county police, accompanied by their parents. There, they started giving their statements immediately. Tony couldn't stop crying and was hard to understand. But not only that, they also had to take several breaks because she was having nervous breakdowns. And the truth is that since they didn't know Yanda and had just barely met Melinda, they had only met her a few days before. They had little information, only knowing the victim's name was Yanda. That's all they knew, besides the story Melinda told them about why she wanted to kill her. Anyway, with this information, the report, and the recently found body, they were able to make the connection. All of this led to the conclusion that the woman who had been found was clearly Shanda, especially since it matched the fact that she had been burned. The detectives were able to obtain the dental records that positively identified Shanda as the victim. And after making all the connections, the 4 girls who had been involved were identified and arrested. So Melinda Loveless and Lori Tackett were arrested. On January 12th, it was possible mostly and almost entirely because of the statements from Tony Lawrence and Hope Rippey. The prosecution immediately declared their intentions to try Melinda and Lori as adults. For several months, the prosecution and the defense attorneys did not reveal any information regarding the case, giving the media only the statements from Tony and Hope. The trial began in 1993, on December 14, 1992. It was the opening day of Melinda Loveless's sentencing hearing, and by then the case was already on everyone's lips. It was very controversial because of all the factors I described before. They were minors. It was a brutal torture. And the girls' profiles were perfect to create an interesting narrative in the newspapers, almost like a story. The bad ones were all lesbians, and one of them even liked the occult. In the 90s, the whole topic of homosexuality was still quite taboo, to the point where it could be used to create evil antagonist villains, and the victim was a good girl. She had caring parents, excelled academically, was popular, athletic, and maintained her hair well. Things that could be mentioned and used to feed this story in a way that the media could make it explode. That's how all of this, together, led to it becoming one of the most well-known cases at that time. Everyone was waiting for the trial and wanted harsh sentences. The prosecutor described Yanda's kidnapping room, the trip to the witch's castle, the beating, and the strangulation, Shanda's imprisonment in the trunk, and the beatings with the iron tool. All of this with images of Shanda's burned body. During the hearing, they also talked about the letters. There was one very specific letter in which Melinda wrote that she wanted to kill Shanda, which is obviously proof that she had planned it beforehand. But it was also clarified that the other letters should not be used because the only purpose of reading those with sexual content was to sensationalize the case. And they reinforced the problem of homophobia that she had been trying to fight. The prosecutor, however, was in favor of taking all the letters into account. Beyond this altercation during the trial, the conclusions were clear. Melinda had planned and executed the murder of Shanda Shatter. The 4 young women were then tried as adults, and to avoid the death penalty, they all accepted plea deals to cooperate. The 4 young women had, as I already mentioned, a very turbulent and troubled past, including sexual, physical, and psychological abuse. They didn't have a good time. During their childhoods and teenage years, Tony Lawrence, Hope Rippey, and Lori Tackett had a history of self-harming behavior. They all cared about each other. Tackett, who had borderline personality disorder, experienced hallucinations. Melinda, who had planned and led the attack, actually had the most history of abuse and mental disorders. It was requested that all of these be considered. Finally, Lori Tackett and Melinda Loveless were sentenced to 60 years in prison, to be served at the Indiana Women's Prison in Indianapolis. Tackett was released in 2018 and served 1 year of probation. The incredible thing and what was obviously terrible for many people, is that Melinda was released in 2019. Hope Rippey was sentenced to 60 years, with 10 years suspended for mitigating circumstances, plus 10 years of supervised probation. On appeal, a judge reduced her sentence to 35 years, and in exchange for her cooperation, Toni Lawrence was allowed to plead guilty to a charge of criminal confinement and was sentenced to a maximum of 20 years. Keep in mind that Toni was one of the most affected by the crime, because from the beginning she didn't even agree with any of it. And you could see it, especially when she was in jail. The first few weeks when she wasn't told what was going to happen, when she would testify, or when she would be able to get free from all of that, they locked her in a cell where she was watched all the time. One weekend, when her parents had gone on a trip to another state, she took a bunch of pills and was in a coma for 5 days. So, as you can see, she wasn't a very mentally stable person, and everything that happened had really affected her a lot. And everyone has different opinions about how much of a sentence each girl deserved, if all were involved in the plan, whether one participated less or more than others. There are people who agree with the sentence that Toni got, and others who don't. Beyond that, in October 2007, Melinda's lawyer requested a hearing to discuss her release, precisely to try to get her released. He said that Melinda suffered from severe developmental delays due to abuse in her childhood. He also said that she had not been properly represented and advised by her assigned lawyer during her sentencing, which caused her to accept a deal based on exaggerated assumptions about her chances of receiving the death penalty. He also mentioned that Melinda was only 16 when she signed the agreement to enter into a contract with Indiana without parental or guardian consent, which was not given. If the judge accepted these arguments, Melinda could have been retried or released immediately. In 2008, Jefferson District Judge Ted Todd rejected Melinda's petition. Then, Toni Lawrence was released on December 14, 2000, after 9 years in prison. She remained on parole until 2002. On April 28, 2006, Hope Rippey was released from the Indiana Women's Prison. She was also released on parole after serving 14 years of her original sentence, and remained on parole for 5 years until April 2011. Lori Tackett was released from the Rockville Correctional Facility on January 11, 2018 after serving almost 26 years, and was on parole for 1 year. Melinda was released on September 5, 2019 after serving more than 26 years, and she is still on parole. The commotion about that persists to this day. There are interviews with her from a few years ago in which she seems remorseful, she seems sorry, but there are people who don't believe her. And that's up to each person. The truth is, I don't know exactly under what beliefs they released her so quickly. I mean, I don't know who signed off saying that Melinda Loveless is okay to be in your city. A few years after the crime, in 1991, Melinda's father was convicted. And once he was released, he tried to sue the Floyd County Jail for $39 million in federal court. According to him, he had suffered cruel and unusual punishments during his 2 years of imprisonment. This was not successful. And keep in mind that some of his complaints included that they hadn't let him sleep in his bed during the day or read the newspaper. Regrettably, Shanda's father, Stephen Shatter, passed away from alcoholism in 2005 at age 53. After finding out what happened to his daughter following the crime, he was utterly devastated. Jackie, Shanda's mother, said that he definitely died of a broken heart. The Shanda Shatter Student Foundation was established in January 2009. The foundation planned to provide scholarships to 2 students per year in New Albany. One for a student who was continuing their education and another for a student who was starting their career, and it was supposed to buy equipment and tools. In 2018, Yanda's mother said the foundation had ceased operations and was not accepting donations anymore. One of the most controversial events occurred in 2012. Yanda's mother made contact with Melinda Loveless, and Jackie donated a puppy named Angel as a tribute to Yanda for Melinda to train in Indiana's Canine Assistance Program through the Project to Heal project, which provided service pets to people with disabilities. There's a whole interview with Melinda. This is actually one of the most criticized events, not so much by Jackie, but rather because at one point, for example, Melinda starts crying but without any tears. No one believes her? They were already starting to ask, why was Melinda so free? But one way or another, Melinda trained dogs for this program for several years. In response to the criticism, Jackie said the following: "It's my decision, Yanda is my daughter. If you don't allow good things to come out of bad, nothing gets better. I did what my daughter would have wanted. Ella would have wanted that." And in fact, she intended to donate a dog every year in honor of Yanda. Finally, this case appeared on Dr. Phil's show and Amanda was there being interviewed. Now, I can't show you the interview because they're very careful with copyright. I can't even show you a sample, but I recommend going to watch it. Anyway, the whole time she gets defensive and acts as if she had nothing to do with the crime. Maybe it's good to remind you that Yanda was 12 years old when they started having sexual relations. Not only that, but Amanda said she didn't do anything, that Yanda was the one who made the first move, locking her in her bathroom. She also said in that interview that it was with the correctional officer she knew, with some of the letters that Melinda had written to her in which she said she wanted to kill Yanda, but after that, she didn't hear anything else about it until Yanda had already been killed. In the show, she speaks with significant arrogance and a very defensive tone. And Jackie, Yanda's mother, says that she believes she should have been in jail too. She's an accomplice to the crime and knew what would happen. Meanwhile, Amanda defends herself by saying that she had nothing to do with it, that she also lost many freedoms. She mentions for some reason that they took her off the basketball team and that people don't know her story. It's a little strange. Go watch it if you want. If you don't want to, just stick with my personal point of view and judge it for yourselves. Is that part of the interviews on YouTube? The Dr. Phil show is also online, but it's not on YouTube. They're strict with copyright, but you can probably find it. For now, that's all I have to say about the case. Tell me what you think. Also, what do you think about the sentences and how Amanda behaved, or if she should have also been in jail? What did Jackie think? It's a very regrettable crime. There's a documentary, there's this episode of Dr. Phil, and there's also a book in case you want to know a little more about the case. But anyway, this is where we end. Here are my Patreons and channel members. Thank you for supporting me through those means. And with nothing more to say. Here you have a new video. Here you have a recommended video. You can subscribe by clicking on my face, and I'll see you in another video. Goodbye.